These dishes, they're covered in olive oil, bacon grease and food dirt. This is a homemade dish soap. It's not a gentle hand soap. It's a weapon against grease. And today I'm gonna show you exactly how to make it. I'm Perry, and if you ever tried to make a dish soap before and it didn't work out, today you will find out why. We are using a 95% coconut oil concentration formula that is super cleansing for the dishes. It looks like that. So this is the actual soap, and it's made inside this beautiful coconut shell that you can find anywhere. I've been using this for the past 3 years, and it's one of the best and most simple soap making recipes out there. You can literally make it with only 2 oils, sodium hydroxide, and you can also add your fragrance of preference, and as we will see later on, citric acid. So let's look at the formulation. This recipe contains 95% coconut oil and 5% castor oil. But why do we add these oils and not olive oil or shea butter? So coconut oil is very high in lauric acid and myristic acid. So what lauric acid and myristic acid do once they react with sodium hydroxide is that they create a lot of bubbles that are very cleansing. Therefore, adding 95% coconut oil will make sure that we will have something that is super cleansing, suitable to clean off all the dirt in the dishes. And what about castor oil? Now the rest 5% castor oil is added because castor oil is high in ricinoleic acid. And castor oil, what it does is that it adds this thickness to your lather. So if you see castor oil, we will see it later on, it's a very viscous and very thick oil. And when you combine it with coconut oil will create an amazing cleansing lather, and then castor oil will come in to make this lather very thick. A little goes a long way, so you don't need to add a lot of castor oil, because if you do add a lot, your soap lather might feel a bit sticky afterwards. So let's take a look at the soap calc recipe. By the way, I will show you how to make this at the end of the video. What I love about soap calc is that it calculates how much oil you should add, how much lye, how much water, and it also gives you a scoring. It tells you that your soap recipe has a score of this for cleansingness, for hardness, for conditioning, for the INS value. And as we will see for this recipe, the typical range of cleansingness is something between 12 and 22. That's the optimal range. We are at 64, just for you to understand how cleansing this recipe is. And you will see that, of course, hardness is also very high, so the soap actually hardens so fast. So I will show you a way to avoid cracking, because if you don't do it correctly, it can harden so fast that your soap might crack. And then I'm adding 0.3% superfat. For anyone who is new here, superfat is basically the extra oils we add, the ones that do not react with lye. And typically for soap making, for body soap, hand soap, a typical range is 5%. But for this recipe, of course, we want something that is very, very cleansing, so that's why we go almost down to 0. I didn't go completely down to 0, I just left at 0.3% just to leave a very tiny safety margin. Even 0% will be okay. By the way, if you're new to soap making, or if you have tried to make different soap recipes and you have failed in the past, I break down the complete system on how to make your own soap for the body, hands, dishes, for the face. I also include some recipes for the hair, some poo bars, conditioner bars, creams, and so on in my ebook. You can find it in the link in bio. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and here's where chemistry comes in. Do you see this ingredient? This is citric acid. Now, citric acid naturally is found in lemons and other fruits, and it's basically an acid. Industrially, it's produced by fermentation, which is also a natural process, and we're also going to use it today for our soap. But why would I use citric acid? Citric acid is the secret weapon that makes our soap work perfectly fine in hard water. Let me explain the chemistry without making you fall asleep. When soap comes in contact with hard water, and where I live we have very hard water, Hard water contains a lot of magnesium and calcium. Then the soap reacts with magnesium and calcium and creates what we call soap scum, which is basically this white powder that you might find in your shower, sometimes left on the dishes and in your bathroom sink. So what citric acid does is that it grabs these magnesium and calcium ions before the soap does. And the product of this reaction is something that is completely soluble in water, so you don't get this soap scum. It basically completely neutralizes the hard water. But here's the thing, as we will see here, citric acid reacts with your sodium hydroxide, your lye, and neutralizes some of it. So basically your citric acid is eating up part of your lye budget. For every 1 gram of citric acid, you lose around 0.62 grams of lye or sodium hydroxide. In this recipe, we're actually adding 3.3 grams of citric acid, so we will need 2 grams extra of sodium hydroxide. So here's everything you need for this recipe. Coconut oil, which is basically the most important ingredient. Castor oil, which we'll add as we talked about thickness to your lather. Sodium hydroxide, absolutely necessary, otherwise you don't have a soap. Sodium hydroxide is what converts oils into soap. Water, and for this we use distilled water because we want consistency over our batches, and we know that tap water might contain some heavy metals and salts that might create some problems. Citric acid, as we discussed, citric acid is the ingredient that prevents soap scum from forming. Now, is citric acid absolutely necessary? No. I can show you also how to make the recipe without citric acid at the end, where I'm going to show you how to calculate the recipe in soap calc. But it's good to have. It just takes your recipe from, let's say, beginner to advanced. And then fragrance or essential oil. This is also optional. If you don't like fragrances, you don't need to add that. I'm gonna add geranium essential oil because it's very citrusy and I really like it for the dishes. Then equipment, we're gonna use a digital scale. I like to use the double digital scale that is very precise because precision can be very important, especially if you're working with small amounts, like below 1 kilo of oils. Then you need precision. If we were to make a huge batch of soap, let's say 10 molds with 10 kilo of oils, then precision is not that important there because the error is very little. Then we're gonna need some bowls, like stainless steel bowls. Don't use aluminum bowls because aluminum might react with sodium hydroxide. You can use plastic if you want, but only if you're using hard plastic. Otherwise, soft plastic might react with lye and it might, that's not really good. Then we're gonna use a thermometer. That's always good to have. This is an infrared thermometer, so you don't have to put it in the liquid. We always want to make sure that our oils and lye solution are in low similar temperature before mixing them together, because as I will discuss later, this will give us a lot of control. Then a stick blender, when we mix the oils and lye solution together. Something to mix your lye into the water, like a spatula or whatever you have. Make sure you don't use it for cooking food afterwards, of course. And then we need a soap mold. In this case, we're using these coconut shells here. But you can make it whatever shape you want. You can also just make your own soap mold for this one. So this is the most exciting part. First of all, let's talk about safety. We're gonna prepare our lye solution right now. And what is lye? For people who are new here, lye is also called sodium hydroxide. That's the chemical name. And sodium hydroxide is basically the intermediate in this reaction that takes your oils and converts them into soap and glycerin. There is no sodium hydroxide in the final product if you do everything correctly, because if there was, then it wouldn't be safe to use. And that's why in hand soap and body soap, we always use superfat to make sure that everything has reacted completely. So there is no sodium hydroxide in the final product. It's just an intermediate that is used to convert the oils into soap. Back in the days when soap was created, like thousands of years ago, they used to make soap with wood ash. Wood ash contains potassium hydroxide, so they used to mix wood ash literally from burning wood with animal fat usually, and that was how thousands of years ago they used to make soap, and that's how the first soap was made. And we basically follow the same procedure chemically. It's just that we have pure ingredients. We have pure sodium hydroxide, we have a huge variety of oils, not just the oils they had there, which was mainly animal fat, and then we have a lot of pure other ingredients like essential oils and so on. So before we start making the lye solution, let's talk about safety. Lye sodium hydroxide is a very strong base, meaning that it's a chemical that has very high pH, close to 14. That means a strong base as well as a strong acid. They're very dangerous for you. They're very dangerous, also the fumes they create. They're very dangerous if they touch your skin. They can be very caustic, so they can literally burn you. So we have to be very careful when handling lye. First rule when handling lye is always use gloves. Then second rule is that make sure you are in a well ventilated area. And then third rule is that you always add the lye in the water, never the other way around. Why is that? If you add water inside sodium hydroxide, then you will create a highly concentrated solution of sodium hydroxide. That will create a very highly exothermic reaction that could create a lot of fumes, and that's very dangerous for you. So right now we're gonna go ahead and prepare our lye solution. So first I'm going to measure our water. I'm gonna check my recipe, and I can see here 110 grams. So we have our water here, and now we're gonna first dissolve the citric acid in water, because the citric acid dissolves very easily in water. And after that, we're gonna add our sodium hydroxide. So I'm using 1% citric acid. For my recipe, this is 3.3 grams. And now I'm gonna stir until citric acid is completely dissolved, and then I'm gonna add the sodium hydroxide. Little pause here. So when I say water, I always add distilled water. But why do we add distilled water in soap making? You can still make soap with tap water. It's just that tap water, the consistency changes a lot. Tap water contains a lot of salts, a lot of heavy metals, and those might affect your saponification reaction. Perfect, our citric acid is fully dissolved. Now I'm going to add the sodium hydroxide, and then I'm going to take it outside where it's very cold to cool down and to avoid breathing in all the fumes. And as I said, we add sodium hydroxide plus the extra amount calculated for the citric acid. I'm going to show you how to calculate this recipe in the end. While we wait, let's go ahead and measure our coconut oil, and then we're going to melt it over a double boiler. So now our coconut oil is melted. Let's go ahead and add castor oil. So for castor oil, we're adding 5%, which is 16.5 grams for this recipe. Our lye and oil solution is almost at low similar temperature. I'm aiming around 28-30 degrees Celsius. Now, why do we want low temperatures? Because when we mix the oils and lye solution, the saponification reaction starts happening. If the temperature is too high, the saponification reaction speeds up. And when the saponification reaction speeds up, then you start having soap molecules, and your soap solution starts solidifying quite fast. And when it solidifies quite fast, you don't have time to add your whatever colorants or split it in two batches to add different colors, or even add it into the mold. Sometimes it has happened to me that it solidified so fast into the bowl that I didn't have time to pour it into the mold. And that's the so-called trace acceleration. So one way to avoid trace acceleration is to always make sure you mix your oils and lye solution at low similar temperatures. The other way is to make sure you use essential oil or fragrance oils that do not contain things like vanillin, for example, that really accelerates trace. And if you're planning to use a fragrance oil that accelerates trace, make sure you add it at the very end. You mix it and then pour it into the mold very quickly. Another way to avoid trace acceleration is to make sure your lye solution is not very concentrated. So if you're working with a lye concentration above 35%, you might be risking that your lye solution is very concentrated, and when you add your oils, it thickens up really fast. And now we are ready to mix. Before we do that though, let's go ahead and make our essential oil blend. So I'm gonna grab a beaker, and for this recipe I'm gonna go ahead and add 30 grams per 1000 grams of oils. So I'm gonna keep it very simple this time. I'm gonna add patchouli essential oil. Only 20% of my essential oil blend is gonna be patchouli. I'm adding patchouli because patchouli is a note of heavy molecular weight, and what it does is that it makes your whole essential oil blend more long lasting. So it will help the other notes to hold on longer, so that after 3, 4, 5 months your soap still smells nice. And then I'm gonna keep it simple. I'm only gonna add after that geranium essential oil, which is the rest 80%. And now comes my favorite part, mixing the oil and lye solution together. But first, let's check temperature. We are 28-30 degrees Celsius, which is perfect. And we are ready to mix our lye solution into the coconut oil and castor oil. Coconut oil is my favorite oil because it also creates this very white soap. Usually when you add other types of oil like olive oil, your soap gets slightly beige. So our soap now has reached lye trace, which means it starts getting thick and like that, staying on the stick blender like this, as you will see. So I'm gonna go ahead now and add my essential oil blend, mix, and then right away add it into my mold. Oh yeah, I actually thought I made for 3, but actually it's more like 2. So now what I like to do is that I like to shake and tap it to remove any trapped air. It's ready and it already looks amazing. It already starts solidifying completely. Now what's gonna happen is that because it's made with coconut oil tends to overheat. So this soap we are not going to insulate. Usually if you have been following me for a while, you will see that I insulate the soaps with towels. This one we are not going to do that, because if we do, it will overheat and it will crack, completely crack. I have an example here of what happens when it cracks, and it looks like that. Do you see this thing here? This is a crack. So what I like to do now, and what I have been doing to troubleshoot this overheating and cracking, is first of all, not insulating. Second, I put it in the fridge, and I put it in the fridge for around 1 to 2 hours. And after 1 to 2 hours, I'm checking the temperature. If it's below 37 degrees, I'll take it out. If I see it's above 37, 38 degrees Celsius, then I will keep it inside the fridge until it starts dropping, and that will ensure that my dish soap will not overheat. Guys, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you like this video, please subscribe and comment down below what other skincare products you would like me to make. Now I'm gonna go ahead and make the soap recipe in soapcalc.net to show you how to do that with the exact formulations and everything. And as always, My aim is not for you to just copy recipes. It's also for you to learn how to formulate and how to design your own recipes, and to say, oh, I actually want a soap that is more cleansing or less cleansing, and therefore I'm gonna change the coconut oil ratio. Or I want a soap that is more creamy, and therefore I'm gonna add shea butter or cocoa butter, because I know these butters add a lot of creaminess and structure to my soap. That's how I want you to think, and that's what my aim with people who watch my videos. So thank you so much for watching, and see you next time. Welcome to the soapcalc.net tutorial. So let's click at recipe calculator, and then we click on the type of lye. Here we want sodium hydroxide because we're making cold process soap with that is solid basically. If we were making liquid soap, we would use potassium hydroxide. So sodium hydroxide, weight of oils, for this recipe I used 330 grams. Lye concentration, I had it at 35%. Anything between 33 and 35% is on the typical range. Superfat, 0.3%. Even if you put 0%, it's still fine. Fragrance, I had it at 30 grams per kilo of oils. And then let's go here. It has the list of basically all the oils you can think of. So coconut oil is our main oil, and then we also add castor oil. And we start first by setting the percentage to 95% for coconut oil and 5% for castor oil. And then we click on calculate recipe, and then we click on view or print recipe, and that's where we get all the information we need. First of all, we get how much water we need to add, 110 grams, how much lye or sodium hydroxide we need to add. Then we have our coconut oil. It says how much we need to add and how much castor oil we need to add. And as I said, what's perfect about soap calc is that it will give you an indication of how your soap will look like. And by looking at this course, you can have a prediction that, okay, my soap is super cleansing, quite hard, so I know this is not going to be a very suitable soap to use for my hands on a day-to-day basis, or for a face bar, forget it. That would be too bad and too cleansing. So guys, thank you so much for watching all the way to here. I really appreciate that. And then I'll see you next time.